So what I would like to introduce now are the paradigms of evolutionary astrology as developed by Jeffrey Green. And you find them in his books, Pluto, The Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. And I would like to share them. There are 6 steps. And what they basically allow you to is to look deeper into the horoscope, as if the horoscope would be like a spiral through time. As the teacher of Yogananda said, a soul incarnates the moment when the planetary constellations are in alignment with the individual karma. Therefore, the symbolism in the chart reflects the unchangeable past and the eventual future development. And as we have learned, the soul is symbolized by Pluto. So the first step is Pluto in sign and house. That shows where the deepest security of the soul has been until it was born, and as we are creatures of habits, where we tend to deviate to when we are going through troubles. Like if someone have a Pluto in the 12th house and there's troubles, like evolutionary bumpy roads, they go to sleep or to meditate or to drink. 12th house, 12th house, 12th house, right? So the first step is Pluto in house, sign, and aspects. And it shows you what the soul's deepest structure of desires was and still is. Especially when the Pluto is located either in a cardinal sign or cardinal house. Then the soul is still in the process of learning, quote unquote, that lesson. But as we are not our soul, the soul is the ocean wave, but me, Ulrich, ego is a little tiny wave among many waves on the soul wave. And so the moon in this life would be the Ulrich self-image, and the south node of the moon, which looks like a U, is the symbol of step number 2 that we now want to look. What kind of previous incarnations / personalities did the soul, Pluto, create relative to its desire structure in past lives to make these lessons or desires livable in a personality, i.e. ego structure, in the time-space universe? So step 1 is Pluto in sign house aspects. Step 2 is, where is the south node of the moon located in house, sign, and aspects? That shows you what kind of former Ulrichs or Ulriches did, in alignment with the soul desire, incarnate, and what they were about to do. Like, let's say the south node would be in Leo, we could say there were many incarnations in royal or aristocratic families, with a certain kind of a regal demeanor. Step number 3 will be, where is the planetary ruler of the south node in house, sign, and aspects? The planetary ruler of the south node is the planet that rules the sign where the south node is located. And that is somewhere in the chart, again, in a house, in a sign, and it forms aspects. That shows us the modus operandi, the more detailed how that former incarnations, that former Ulrichs or Ulriches, how they were operating, the kind of like action and reaction, right? And these 3 steps are the DNA of the chart. They are the soul's DNA, so to speak. They are where everything else is linked to. In your chart analysis, if you do evolutionary astrology, must be astrologically linked. We could compare it with a trunk of a tree. Pluto is the roots. The south node is the trunk. And the rule of the south node describes the quality of the trunk. And then all the other planets, Venus, Mercury, Jupiter in house sign, are the branches that describe the unconscious memories of the unchangeable past, which bring our abilities, fears, karmic issues, etc. With these 3 steps and then adding the other planets like branches to the trunk, you are able to dive deepest into the chart. And if you apply meaningful sentences, even in that case, but now you use past tense language. You are a soul that for many lifetimes had the desire, yada yada yada, sign, house, aspects. Therefore your soul created incarnations, south node, step number 2, house sign, that did and experienced yada yada yada. And more detailed, ruler of the south node, past tense. Then you add all the other things too. When you're done with that, the next step is it's called the Pluto polarity point. As everything is in duality or polarity, the Pluto polarity point is that point that is located opposite of the natal Pluto in house and sign. So if you would have a Pluto in the 5th house, which shows for many lifetimes you are a soul that is very self-empowered, very strong, very creative, very radiant. You used your abilities, or the soul is like very strong and creative. How did the incarnation, south node somewhere, ruler south node? Then we go to the Pluto polarity point, which would be from the 5th house, let's say 5th house Leo. The Pluto polarity point would be 11th house Aquarius. And that Pluto polarity point, in short PPP, shows the soul's intention in this incarnation. The soul's intention. I'm not my soul. I'm a tiny little wave on the big wave on the endless ocean. So the soul's intention is the Pluto polarity point. But because the ego, the client or myself, I'm not my soul, I am of my soul, I cannot say, oh, I have to go to the 11th house for my evolution to be accomplished. But the north node, step number 5, in house and sign, which is always opposite the south node, that one shows you where your or the client's evolutionary orientation shall be in this life. So, and how that should be done is step number 6, the planetary ruler of the north node, which is located somewhere in house and sign and making aspects. So it's very simple. But when you start working with that, your mind will go, oh, this is not possible. How can I know? There will be a lot of resistance. So basically you start with the Pluto, step number 1. Your soul is a soul that has this and this desires, and for many lifetimes you incarnated, step number 2, south node and house sign aspects, blah, 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 blah. And you make this and this experience back and forth, back and forth. You can always skip between these 3, like playing yo-yo, and become very virtuous. Then after describing certain details with historical knowledge, every sign has a correlation to epochs and cultures, you can go back and forth. And at one point your client will have a reaction. You will see the message goes emotionally in. Then you can do it whenever you want to, but it's wise to wait until the client is ripe. Then you go, you know what? In this life, your intention is Pluto polarity point, but that's the soul intention. But in order for you to be in alignment in this life with your soul's intention, the chart recommends, it's a good way to phrase it, that you focus in your daily life routine. North node, step number 5 in house sign aspects. How shall you do that? Step number 6, the ruler of the south node. So basically, let's say you would have a flat tire. Your intention is to get the tire fixed. That would be Pluto polarity point. Where you put the jack is where the north node is. How you do the jack, if you do it with your foot, if you let your girlfriend do it, that would be the ruler of the north node, the modus operandi. Make sense? And then all the other knowledge that you know from past lives falls automatically into place. These are the classical 6 steps analysis of evolutionary astrology. So we do the exceptions now of evolutionary astrology. The most common exception in evolutionary astrology is when you find one or more planets forming a so-called T-square to the nodes. We know that the nodes are always opposite of each other. So if there's another planet making a square to north node and south nodes, you can also draw it like a T. It looks like a T. It can be one planet, it can be two planets next to each other, like in conjunction, or sometimes two opposing planets. But to keep it simple, let's start just with one. If you see that symbolism, one planet forming a T-square, it is an indicator that the evolutionary journey was somehow disturbed in past lives. That not that you did something wrong, but let's say there were cultural events or nature events, or there was a war or Hiroshima bomb, which kind of like screwed the thing up. And what I would highly recommend when you get your chart out of the printer, first thing you check is birth time, birthplace, birth time correct, because you don't want to make this mistake. Second most important glance, if you do with evolutionary astrology, you look if there's one or two planets or more planets forming a T-square. For you not to apply the regular evolutionary paradigms, the 6 steps I just explained, but to be aware, there's an exception, and that is important. Jeffrey Green calls those symbolism skipped steps. And I would recommend that you do not use this terminology. Because if you have a client with a heavy emphasis in Virgo or Pisces or 6th house, and you tell, you know what, you have skipped steps in your chart, they already feel guilty. I did something wrong. I'm hopelessly lost. So don't use that. It is difficult to describe because one thing, what it means is, previous life dynamics caused the person, the soul, the incarnations of the soul, to somehow skip from the south node, which was not accomplished yet, already to the north node. But being not able to continue with the north node because the south node was not completed yet. And therefore, whatever the circumstances were, they were kind of like little south node, north node, south node, north node. I usually explain to my clients, I have a very stupid example, sorry, Mrs. Client, but it's a little bit, imagine there would be a girl in school in 2nd grade, and she's so good that all the teachers and the parents say, you know what, you're going to skip from 2nd class to 4th. 4th class is fine, but there's some kind of like things she's not good in because she lacks the knowledge of number 3. So she goes back, south node, to the 3rd grade. 3rd grade is a kind of boring because she already knows what's going to come in the 4th grade. Plus, she never knows where she really belongs because her classmates are like, so she's kind of like running between the classes back and forth, but not south node, north node, south node, north node. But the energy is north node, planet that forms it, south node. South node, planet that forms it, north node. It's always going via that planet that forms the T-square. Or more precisely, because we work also with the rulers of the south node and the north node, it is planet that forms the T-square, south node, ruler of the south node, the modus operandi, then skipping like either to the south node or to the planet, then to the north node, ruler of the north node, going back to the north node, south node. So it is it's like a back and forth. And like for instance, if you would have Jupiter T-squaring the nodes, it shows that your truth, your interpretation of the meaning of life, for whatever reasons which are seen in the location by Jupiter in house and sign, and the location of the north node and the south node, and the rulers in house and sign and aspects, they give you the information, what was the reason that her truth, her interpretation of the meaning of life, her natural shamanism, so to speak, her cosmologic feeling of being united with everything got kind of like discombobulated, right? Most likely by the church, Jupiter. Maybe she was like a pagan and had like a deep knowledge and wisdom about like natural healing things. And now there comes the church and says, you're a witch. Let's say the South Node would have been in Scorpio, and she would have been killed. So now, next life, she would try to survive, activate. I called them that the other node, the North Node, was already activated. As I said, they were skipping. So you can see both nodes as South Node. And then I usually say the activated North Node. So we have a Jupiter T-square in the nodes, South Node in Scorpio. Her beliefs and natural wisdom, Jupiter, was persecuted and killed. She was abandoned, suffered death or torture, Scorpio. So now, in order for her to survive, let's say she escaped the torture chamber, she now tries to survive, activated North Node in Taurus, but only by denying her truth, by being system compatible. That triggered a feeling that she is rejecting, Scorpio, her own truth, which made her pissed and angry, Scorpio. So this kind of thing. So we go back and forth, back and forth. The first step, of course, of this chart analysis is, again, we start with Pluto. So the first step would be Pluto in sign house, an aspect shows the desired nature of previous lives. And then we apply first South Node, step number 2. What kind of incarnations we had. Together, step number 3, with the modus operandi, the planetary ruler in house sign aspects. Then we would go to the planet that forms the T-square, which is the issue, which was kind of like causing the problem. Then we do next step, I'm not going to number it out. The next step would be the North Node, which we read like a South Node, because it was like 2nd grade, 4th grade, 3rd grade. The ruler of the activated North Node shows us the modus operandi more in detail. We go back to the Jupiter, we do the back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. Again, repeating the things. These symbolism is the trunk, it's the essence. All other symbols can be astrologically adjusted and will make sense. And then at one point, the client will either ask or you will offer, in order for your evolution or your soul's intention this life is the Pluto polarity point, right? As I described. But before I do that, I usually explain to the client, listen, or to you right now, the tension of that flip-flop, this discombobulated like T-square is so high that in previous life, it was almost as if you take a fabric and you pull it until it starts to rip. So the person is like, kind of like, what am I? South Node, North Node? Yeah, because I know both, but nothing gives me like the completion. So that symbolism in this life shows that the soul has decided to recover those flip-flop kind of things. And similar to a fabric that was ripped, that you want to put together again, you take a needle and you sew from left to right to right to left to left to right. So the whole life of that person with the planet T-square nodes will experience the flip-flop from that planet who forms the T-square to the both activated nodes and the planetary ruler in order to recover and sew together what seemed to be separate or ripped. And therefore the soul's intention, next step in analysis, is the Pluto polarity point, like in the other paradigm. But now the next step is when we come to the where shall the client focus? Where's the resolution? Where's the orientation in this life for the client? We need to, because the North Node is as well known as the South Node, there's a very simple technique. Jeffrey describes it in his book a little complicated, but the easiest way is you would now, in order to figure out which one of the two nodes is that node that I call the resolution node, meaning that node where the individual should focus on in this life to be mainly focused and orientated towards to, and that is by you standing on the planet that forms the T-square. Like as if you stand, you look in the center of the horoscope. That node that is to your left hand is the resolution node. That can be the North Node, that can be the South Node, doesn't matter. When this client focuses on that node and modus operandi, its ruler in house sign aspects, it will automatically be in alignment with a very more or less harmonious healing of these skipped steps. So we stand on the planet that forms the T-square. We look to the node that is to the left. Jeffrey described it as that node that was last in conjunction before birth. Bit complicated, it's always the one to the left. Yeah. If you have two planets T-squaring the nodes in opposition, like one is from here, boom, 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 the other one's from there, boom, 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 boom. You do the description as we described, like in the past lives. You just have to talk more. You take the Jupiter on the one side and maybe the Venus on the other side, or the Mercury, right? And you do the same kind of like thing that you describe the conflicts by meaningful sentences in past tense version. Then you come up to the resolution, Pluto polarity point, the soul's intention. And then the next step would be you describe the resolution for the Jupiter. You stand on that planet. Look to the left. That is the resolution node for the unresolved Jupiter belief, pagan issues, right? And you describe them. This is the resolution node and its planetary ruler. And then you go to the other side, stand on the other planet, let's say Mercury, look to the left. That one is the one for the Mercury. And you have to bring that in a analysis. There are two further exceptions. The one is quite easy to explain. It is when you find Pluto in the natal chart in conjunction with the North Node, which basically happens more or less like every 18 years. But it is a symbolism, and of course everyone born in that year, or at least in these couple of months, will have that. But because everyone has an individual chart, it applies in different houses, and the ruler might be somewhere else. You do the same thing as in the regular ones. First step, Pluto in sign house aspects. The soul desire in many previous life was yada yada yada, therefore your deepest security is yada yada yada. Therefore, step number 2, the soul created incarnations, Ulrichs or Ulrikes, you go to the south node. The kind of incarnations, house sign aspects. What and how did they operate? Step number 3, ruler of the south node in house sign aspects, the modus operandi. Now we can go back and forth, describe storytelling things in archetypal alignment. Then would come usually the Pluto polarity point. But when there's Pluto conjunct the north node, there is no Pluto polarity point. The natal location of the Pluto is the Pluto polarity point, meaning it is what the soul's intention is in this life. It will continue to work on that. How? North node can be in the same sign, can be in a different sign next to each other. That shows where Mrs. Miller or Ulrich should focus on. And the how would be the ruler of the north node. So basically, if you see Pluto conjunct north node, there's no Pluto polarity point. The natal Pluto is also the symbol when you go into the list. This life's orientation and soul intention is seen by the natal Pluto in house sign and aspects. And the orientation would be the north node. And there's another exception, Pluto on the south node. We do the same steps as before. Basically, the analysis is exactly the same. Step number 1, Pluto. Step number 2, south node, house sign aspects. Step number 3, planetary ruler of the south and house sign aspects. That shows the past life trunk. Pluto polarity point does exist, which lands on the north node. That's step number 4, the soul's intention. How should the person orientate? In case it's like not the same sign, could be like the Pluto polarity point is in Pisces, but the north node is in Aries, but it's yet a conjunction, can happen. Right? So now we would not say, oh, you have to be very Pisces because that's the soul's intention, but you have to focus on physical body impulses, become independent, be direct, give yourself enough space, blah, 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 those kind of things. And how shall I do that? Mars, ruler of the north node, or the ruler of the north node in house sign aspects. Okay? But Pluto on the south node shows that the soul in previous lives, Pluto, has there are three ways. One is the soul has accomplished its soul desires so thoroughly that it has reached in that area where we find Pluto a level of mastership. Mastership means there's nothing to grow, you reached it, you're on the top, right? But there's a collective need for you to offer this mastershiply abilities to small group or large group of people. Can be just the family, can be like the whole world. Which this person with that symbolism has abilities which it knows it has never learned in this life. It just is able to do it. And it is bored to pieces doing that. Frustrated to pieces doing that. Completely. Because there's no sense of personal growth. It is complete service to the collective. That you offer something that bores you to death. Right? That's the one option. My little example is, imagine someone learns medicine and becomes like, quick wrap up, like for many lifetimes, medicine. And in this life, he's the best surgeon, can do everything, best in class, best clinics, heart transplant, but he's bored. Everyone is applauding. I'm so bored. So he starts to drink. He's still doing the best surgeons, everything. So at one point he goes like, you know what, I cannot do that anymore. I'm going to Australia and become a tomato farmer. I do not want to deal with medicine anymore. But as soon as he's in Australia, there's a plane crash and it lands right on his tomatoes. And now he has to do medicine. Stupid example. But when you have Pluto's South Node, until the second Saturn return, more or less, you have to repeat your own past without a sense of personal growth. That's about 54 years. That is freaking frustrating. Freaking frustrating. And for a counselor, it's even more freaking frustrating when you have like a 20-year-old guy sitting there and you have to give him that like message. More nicer if you have someone who has just turned 40, you just say, you know what, I know you're frustrated, but you have about 4 more years. And then suddenly that what you have already given up, the door that you think would never open, will open. And you will walk into a complete liberated life. Because you have fulfilled that what you were asked to help the collective. That's the first option. The second option is, Pluto South Node, the soul was in complete resistance to its evolutionary desires. No, I don't want to eat soup. No, I don't want to learn. No, I don't want to learn medicine. Whatever. So that in this life, the soul is forced, or not forced like forced, but has no other option than to now overcome the resistance. It desires that what it had been resisting in past lives, but whenever it thinks it's close to that soup that it didn't want to eat in past lives, poof, the soup disappears. Again and again and again, until the second Saturn return. Until it just goes like, give me soup! By that, the resistance of past life, the ego trip, is also healed. That's the second version. The third version is the most common one. It is the combination of one, the mastership, and the resistance. Like I have that. In many lifetimes, I had many incarnations in monasteries and other like spiritual realms or metaphysical realms where I learned astrology and those kind of things, and really not really learned astrology. Yeah. So I can do it. I can do it at any time. It was the first time that I was doing like this teaching in English since, I would say, probably 11 years. I've not done it. It's just there. It bores me to pieces. But what simultaneously happened in past lives, when you were in monasteries, you were told private life is not, don't do that, right? So my longing would be to have a very happy private life. But whenever it's close, they died, they committed suicide, they ran away, they become drug addicts, everything. They just disappear. I have a couple more years, so I'm almost done with that kind of thing. So this is like the Pluto North Node, Pluto South Node. It can be very frustrating for the person, but when you as the counselor see that symbolism and you give that this message, even though I got the message when I was like 26, can be frustrating. They go, oh, just like another 27 years and then I'm done. But you're really doing good service because these people are really frustrated. So now we're really done. Done. Thank you very much.
Free your mind.
Remember times without time.
Free